All right, everyone, welcome to episode 11 of the Backyard Banter podcast. I feel like 10, once you cross 10, that's kind of like a threshold that maybe this thing is actually going kind of well. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We've got a great show today, a great guest on tap. But before we get to that, I have to tell you that today's podcast is sponsored, brought to you by realitysportsonline.com, a powerful fantasy platform that lets you manage your fantasy team like a real life NFL general manager. You can use the promo code BYB10 for 10% off the platform fee when you sign up. That's BYB followed by the numbers 1 and 0. So now that we have that out of the way, I can introduce to you a great guest today. It's Mark Schofield from Inside the Pylon. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks for having me. And I got to say, you nailed that read. Your first read, and you just crushed it.
Yeah, I joke a lot on the podcast about how I'm essentially like a very raw host, and this is like I'm normally in the other chair, like if somebody's asking me questions, and now I'm doing this whole thing. So this was a big test point today. So I'm glad you got to be here for it.
No, I'm happy to be here. I mean, it's a big moment. I feel very privileged and honored to be part of that. So how you been, man? The show is great. I love it.
Yeah, it's been good. The show has been fun, and I'm putting a little more, into it. Obviously, now we've got like a sponsorship thing that, there's a new mic and everything. The only thing I'm not doing is like putting any thought into my personal appearance for the video segments.
That's okay.
More people are listening than watching anyways. But Mark, I have to say, like, of all the guests, and this is why I'm really excited to talk to you today. Like, of all the guests that I've had on so far, I feel like I'm least familiar with your background, your story. And I know like we started following each other somewhat, in the last year or something. Like I saw you doing some projects with Matt Waldman, and now you're doing a lot more with Inside the Pylon. So I really want to like kind of dig into who the hell is Mark Schofield? Like, how did you get to where you are now? And like, so kind of, but of course I always ask first, like, how did you, fall in love with the game of football and everything like that? Let's start off there.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, it was really playing the game starting at a young age. I mean, I was a kid growing up in the Boston area in the like mid to late 80s, and I wanted to play hockey. I mean, hockey was still kind of big in the Boston area. The Patriots weren't really good at that time. Nobody really wanted to play football. I was growing up in a family. My dad played hockey in high school. He coached hockey, coached some of my, other family members, my cousins and like juniors. And I was like, I want to play hockey. I want to play hockey. And, being Bruins fans and fans of Bobby Orr, my dad's like, no, you're going to blow your knees out. You're going to be hurt. You're not going to be able to walk when you're 40. So you're not going to play hockey. I was like, well, can I play football then? They're like, oh, okay, go. You can go play football. And I tease them about it now. And I'm like, oh, my back is killing me. My knees are killing me. Thanks for letting me play football instead of hockey, guys. That was a great decision. But I started playing Pop Warner when I was 9. And I mean, the very first play, my very first game, I was a running back and, quick, run inside and spun off the linebacker for a 5-yard gain. And I was hooked from that moment. I mean, I just fell in love with the game and realized early at that same time that I wanted to play quarterback. Like, I wanted to be that guy. I mean, I saw quarterbacks on TV. I was in the huddle with a quarterback. I'm like, I want to be that guy. So that next season, I got a book by Ken Anderson, The Art of Quarterbacking, which is literally like 5 feet away from me. I still refer to it, and learned how to play quarterback and did the drills and became a quarterback the next season and played quarterback really all through up until college, and played all 4 years in college. Played at a high school that I was lucky enough to, play a lot. Got recruited to play by a number of different schools, including some Division I AA schools, some, more well-known Division III schools, but decided that, look, I just still wanted to play. I mean, I wasn't going to play at, Dartmouth or Georgetown. I wasn't going to see the field. I mean, USC, if you want to know how much money these schools have, USC sent me a recruiting packet to say, hey, send us some tape. We like what you're doing. I hadn't really played any varsity snaps yet. But USC just had that amount of money that they could do that, and they could just send this money to everybody. So I got one of those. I literally like hung it on my wall when I was at home. Like, I was like, oh, this is hilarious. I just thought it was a joke. But ended up playing at Wesleyan University, a small Division III school, and played all 4 years there, and just really sort of continued that love of the game, number one. And in the work that I'm doing now, sort of a love of how the plays come together, how the game works on the field, and sort of watching tape and breaking down film. And that's something that kind of started back when I was playing in Pop Warner. My dad, being the coach that he is, wanted to be on the sideline and sort of critiquing my game during the games. I'm like, you can't do this. So he got a video recorder, sat up in the press box and taped the games. And we'd start on the weekends after the game kind of going through them and, watching them initially just for fun. But then I started noticing things, and that just sort of continued. So that's, my quick elevator answer on sort of how I got the sickness.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know that we definitely have not had anybody on the show yet that's played football at the highest level. Well, the second highest level, like college football. Like that's pretty cool. I knew that was part of your background, and because I think that's how I first found you on Twitter, was like doing a quarterback breakdown with Matt Waldman in the RSP Film Room, which of course is a great series. If nobody's checked that out, you're listening. It's a really good way to learn the game completely for free and just pick things up that way. I'm not sponsored to say that. I'm just telling you that because I mean it. But so Mark, like what comes next for you? Obviously you didn't go from college football to the NFL. So what were you doing after, like post college and before where you are now?
No, I mean, my path to this is kind of different, and it mirrors in a way Sigmund and Matt, their paths to where they are now. I mean, when I was in college, I was in a major that was basically like, the easiest way to describe it was like a quad major of history, government, philosophy, and economics. And it was its own little college at Wesleyan. And basically our class structure was you read a book, you write a paper, and you defend it that Friday in class. And it was the only class you had. And I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do. It gets to be junior year in college. I don't know what I want to do. And this is this sort of major. It's like, well, I guess I'll go to law school. And so that's what I did. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. This seems to make sense. Other people have done it, so I'll go to law school. And I went to law school at William & Mary. And
oh, nice. That's my neck of the woods.
Yeah. Down in Williamsburg. Got to spend 3 years down there. Spent more time probably at Busch Gardens than, the classroom or things like that. And that's another story we can perhaps get into. But, graduated law school in May of 2002. And, the job market wasn't exactly the strongest job market in the world at that time because, of the aftermath of 9/11. I mean, I remember being in New York City and in the Times Square area, August of 2001, interviewing with firms, going to these like legal job seminars, trying to line something up for after graduation. And then a month later, those firms, their offices are gone. They're literally gone.
Right.
So coming out of that class, didn't have a job lined up after law school, but I had something lined up because the best decision I probably made at William & Mary was that first sort of month of school, my first year, I went to see about a girl and met a girl, and we're now married 16 years later. And we started like dating that October. And so together, her and I, neither one of us had a job. So we moved to DC, sat for the Maryland bar exam, passed the bar, and started to sort of work our way through the industry. So that was my path after college and law school. I started out as a lawyer. My first job in the sort of the DC area, my first real law job. It was just me and another lawyer, and we were like the in-house attorneys for 3 insurance companies that just insured taxi cabs in the DC area. It was an office on Bennon Road by RFK Stadium, which if you know the area, it's not a place you want to be at night. Like we would literally close the office based upon daylight. Like if it was dark at 4:30, we closed so like people could get home. It wasn't a glamorous way to start my career, but I moved up and moved up and moved up. And eventually, like say, 2011, I was at big law firm, downtown DC offices sort of all over the East Coast. And you'd think, oh, this is a guy that's finally gotten to where he wanted to be. I was miserable. I mean, I was absolutely miserable, and not in the sense that like you talked about with Stoner on his episode, like, sometimes you're in a job and whatever it is, your job sucks and you don't want to be there. And there are days where you just, like you said, you'd rather be on a beach drinking beers than in the office. But, every job has that element. So there was that, but there was other components to it. I mean, civil litigation, it's an adversarial process where the person on the other side is trying to kick your ass. And that's what they're doing. And I had been doing that for 10 years, and I was in this cycle where you'd go to a new job and you crush it for the first 6 months. Like that was me. And Stoner mentioned that in sort of his path too. And then I'd get more work and I'd try to impress people and try to work harder, and I'd get in over my head and I'd be overwhelmed. And then the anxiety and the other mental component here, which I'll fully talk about, Like I was dealing with severe anxiety, like in depression and struggling with it and getting help for it and talking to people, and it wasn't working. And I needed to get out of it. It just wasn't healthy. The law profession and my brain, with the way it works, it just wasn't a good mix. I mean, there were times when that summer of 2013, where I'd be we'd be home from dinner. You've got one son, one child. He's 2. He's playing on the floor. We've got like 30 minutes to spend time with him. After the day, my wife, she's a partner at a law firm. She's pregnant with our second child. They're on the floor. They're playing. And I'm sitting on the couch and I'm just like furiously refreshing my email because I'm so worried that I'm going to get something about work that's going to be even more nerve wracking, but I want to get it. I want to see it. And, Matt, my life is like 8 feet behind the phone and I'm ignoring it. So I'm like, look, I got to get out of this. And I did. And, I left the firm and, they recognized what I was dealing with and knew that I wasn't happy. So I got some time and they gave me a nice little going away present, which I'll forever be grateful for. So it got me some time to figure out what it is I wanted to do. But now I had to figure that out. And, I jump in, I've been rambling for a bit, but, spin that forward a year and I've gone to interviews with other law firms and other like non-for-profits in the DC area. And I'm like, look, I can't practice law anymore. Every time I do this, it's good for about a year and a half. And then I get to this point and the definition of insanity, it's doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. It's not going to be different. So I got to do something different. And that's when I was like, what is it going to be? And I had the idea that, look, I love football. I love to write. And I've had this this fiction book about college football that I've started and stopped and started and stopped. And I want to do that. So summer of 2004, I'm like, I'm done practicing law. I'm going to write. So that's when I made that decision. But then inside the pylon, the idea for that kind of fell into my lap. And
well, before we jump, I'm going to jump in there before we get to kind of that part of the story, because it's just really interesting. Like, and I think that's, like leaving, and we talked about that with Matthew Berry as well, and even Liz Loza a little bit just on the most recent episode, like leaving this career path that you have worked so hard for, but you just feel like shit while you're doing it. And it's a hard, I feel like I personally, I've never had to deal with that because it was like my lack of interest in my day job that made me want to get into football and kind of pushed me into that. So it's a different experience from mine, but I think it's really interesting. And also, like, I kind of want to hit on like, what was like the public reception to that? Because I would imagine that, like, being a lawyer is I feel like it's a pretty cush job as far as like, when you get work and you probably make more money than I do at my current job right now, or especially my job before this. And so like, what was the reception like from either your family, your friends, or just like people in general?
I mean, I'm incredibly lucky in that, obviously it starts with my wife. I mean, I'm incredibly lucky that, she could see it in me, like the toll that, the mental fatigue that was wearing on me. I mean, she could tell that, this wasn't what I wanted. And so she's been incredibly supportive, and I'm incredibly lucky for the foundation around me that I was able to step away from that there wasn't a need to go right back in to get another law job because of, the work put in the decade of practice in law prior to that. And the fact that, I wasn't a good lawyer. She's a great lawyer. Like, she can do the job and can handle it and can come home and, sort of divorce herself from the day to day, where I just couldn't. That wasn't the way my mind worked. So from her, from my parents, from my in-laws, like, they've all been incredibly supportive. Now, in the legal community at large, I mean, there are definitely sort of, strange looks. I mean, I'm still licensed, so I still have to go to legal seminars to keep my bar status, active. And I have to continually go to like legal education seminars, and you have to, go around the room and say who you are and where you work. And you hear, I'm Joe so-and-so, I'm at, the firm of Ben Jarvis Green Ellis or whatever. And, I'm, so-and-so, I'm a, state's attorney, and hi, I'm Mark Schofield. I write about football now. And then, every eye is suddenly on me now because people are like, wait, what? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. So, I mean, in the professional world, it's been a little bit different, but, like I said, I'm so lucky that my wife and my family have been like, they could see it. They could see that I wasn't happy and I needed a break from that. I needed to do something different.
Yeah. And it really does, like, that matters so much to have the support of your loved ones around you. Like, I mean, obviously you and I are, you know, a little bit different age wise. Like when I decided that I was going to pursue this as hard as I could, like, I mean, I was single. I still am single. Yeah, I was single. I'm not married.
We could fix that, people. We could fix that.
I'd rather you not. You don't want to. If you're listening at home and you're a single female, you don't want to go down this road. There's just there's nothing but trouble.
I'm just trying that.
I appreciate that, but you know, so going back to like my story, you know, like when I like told my dad, he and I were kind of both in like tumultuous points in our lives when this kind of all went down. I was like, you know, I was like, Dad, because my plan was, and I've mentioned this before, like I wanted to go back to school to get a PhD in sociology and like can finish all this research that I started as an undergrad. And like, you know, I was well on the path to like doing that. And I just decided, I was like, I don't know. I want to try like I'm young. This is the only time I'm going to have to be able to do this football thing. Like it was just what my heart was speaking to me at the time. Like, this is what you need to do. And so I told my dad that, and he's like, just do it. Just do it. And like having this. So like my point in saying that is like having the support of people in your life, like your closest people. Like there are always going to be those that doubt you. And like you mentioned, in the professional world, it's a little harder. And, you know, there were certainly people I told at the time that did not understand. But like when you have the support of those closest to you, it really is a huge boost. Like, I don't know. I mean, they know you best. So and if they support you, it matters.
It matters a huge deal. And they're the people that will know. And, you know, you get one drive, you get one game in the game of life. Like this is it.
Yeah.
And I could have, you know, tried to make it work in the legal career and like gone through the motions of the day to day and tried to make it struggle. But, you know, you could spin that image of me locked into my phone with the rest of my life happening behind me and spin that forward 10 years. And where does that go? I mean, it could have taken a really bad turn for me. So, you know, the decision to step away from that has, you know, it's improved the like quality of life at home around me, you know, in ways that I can't even describe. It's made it just that much better around me because, you know, I'm not tied to my phone, panic stricken every single moment that I'm home with my family. I'm not. Like I can log off Twitter and the war. I don't need to be plugged into it 24 hours a day. Like I don't need to be furiously sitting there refreshing it. I can go step away from that for a bit, but because the anxiety there, it isn't all consuming like it was in that past life of mine.
Yeah. And coming back to that point about like the people around you, like they will benefit if it works, you know, like you mentioned, you know, that there was obviously stress in your personal or in your professional life and it's affecting your personal life. So they want out of that as much as much as you do. But those are also the people that like, and it's why it's so important to have that support system. Like if you're going to go down this path, because those are the people that are going to have to accept the consequences of your choice,
right?
You know, good and bad, because like there are plenty of times that, you know, while chasing this thing, like, and I kind of mentioned this with Liz last time, like there are plenty of times where like I missed stuff or like my you know, I had to tell friends like, you know, no, I have to finish this project. Like, so I can't go out with you guys tonight. Or like, you know, like when I'm making hard choices about like finishing content and like all that sort of stuff, like I mentioned my dad, like if I was to fail, like he would have had to be the person that, you know, that caught me. And, you know, like in that sort of sense, like same way that if, you know, if things didn't work out with your decision, like obviously they have, but like if they hadn't, your family's the one that has to like take that on. So it's just really crucial to have that, in my opinion.
And, you know, I'm constantly like, you know, asking my wife, like, is this still okay? Because, you know, I like to tell people, look, I'm on a year-to-year Sam Bradford, like, prove it type deal. And that's kind of how I'm approaching this because, you know, it's a risk. I mean, obviously, when you go out there and you start a website and just put yourself out there, like, it's not like sitcoms at LAX. Like, they're not just cutting checks and handing them to people when you start a football website. I mean, there's no safety net below you. So, you know, I was in a position, thankfully, and I still am in a position where I don't need to go out and duplicate the salary that I had when I left the law profession. Now, the trade-off has been huge. You know, the other stuff has been huge, and it's more than made up for, you know, that difference in, you know, money. I mean, we all need to make money. We all have bills to pay, but, you know, what good is it to just pay the bills if you can't enjoy what you're paying for?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember like I think when I think it was, I don't know why I was thinking about this morning, but like, I think when Robin Williams, you know, committed suicide, I think that was now almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
No, not 2 years ago. It was less than that. I don't know. I have no sense of time. But like about a year ago, he was, you know, it was really one of those things that kind of, I think, jarred the national conversation, at least for a moment, that like, wow, maybe success isn't really all about, you know, money or how many people like you or that. It's about like being in touch with who you are as a person and like enjoying your day-to-day life and like just so much more than just your success. And so I think yours is a really good story about that as well. I think that, you know, despite the fact like you're in a job that a lot of people want, you know, or theoretically think they want, you know, it's about more than that.
Yeah. And, you know, if you think about Robin Williams or anybody else that has a job or is in a situation where you might look to that person and think, oh man, on paper, they've got everything. Well, everybody's struggling in some way, you know, more often than not. And, you know, there are people out there that, you know, obviously can be successful lawyers and have a great career and practice for decades. And I wish them all the best, but I learned after 10 years of like beating my head against the wall and going through the same cycle that it just, for the way I'm wired and the way my head was built, like it just wasn't for me. And I got out. And, you know, Sigmund talked about, you know, that horrific car accident where it was like the sign that, look, you know, maybe I need to be doing something else. And for me, it was that moment on the couch, just watching my life go behind me where I'm just like, forget it. You know, I need to make a move. So I did.
No doubt about it. So let's get into that move. Like, so what was the springboard to Inside the Pylon?
Well, I mean, Stoner talked about message boards. Sigmund talked about message boards. Inside the Pylon, as you see it now, it was born back in like 2004, 2005, 2006 on a message board on the sonsofsamhorn.net message board, which is a Boston Red Sox based community, which dates back to 1999. I mean, it's been around for a very long time. It's got a massive membership. I mean, and it's really well regarded in the baseball community. I mean, if you remember when Curt Schilling signed with the Red Sox, that Thanksgiving trip where he was visited by,
Mark, I don't remember anything that happened.
Okay. Well, days before, yeah, I mean, I understand. I hear that. But to fill in that blank, I mean, when Theo Epstein and the Red Sox management went to visit Curt Schilling and sell him on the Red Sox on Thanksgiving 2003, that night he logged on and got on Sons of Sam Horn and like talked to fans and like got in depth on like fly ball ratios at Fenway Park and stuff like that. Like that's how good that community is. But you can't talk Red Sox baseball 365 days a year. There were other things people wanted to talk about, and one of them was football. And being a Red Sox board, there are a lot of Patriots fans. And so if you think of the nucleus of Inside the Pylon, myself, Brian Philpack, Dave Archibald, Chuck Zada, the stuff that we're doing on ITP, we've been doing for years in sort of the football section of that site, like breaking down plays, breaking down coverages and schemes. And I would like break down the Patriots passing game from week to week. And so the summer of 2014, we thought, look, we've been doing this and this little contained, message board. Why not try it on our own, break away, do our own thing, and go live and see if anybody actually wants to read it. And so that's what we did. And we just put ourselves out there. And that's a lot of the people that you've had on have talked about the importance of just start your own blog, just put yourself out there and show yourself to the world. Because if you've got something that you can create, if you've got something you can put across, maybe somebody reads it. Maybe somebody then gives you that hand up from the upper tier, the tier above you, like Rummy talked about, like that extends that hand down to you. And I've had a number of people do that with me and with Inside the Pylon. And we've gotten some breaks along the way, of course, which helps. So that was how it kind of started. I mean, we went live after the week 1 games of the 2014 season and caught a number of breaks along the way. I mean, one of them, first and foremost, starting as a branch off of a Red Sox site, we had a built-in Patriots readership base, and they go on to win the Super Bowl. So we had stuff to just break down and write about up until through the Super Bowl. We were like, this is great. We'll ride this crest. They win the Super Bowl. And then it's like, okay, what now? And that's when I got myself into the draft community, and that's when my head really kind of exploded.
Yeah, for sure. The draft community is definitely there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of interaction. And speaking of the draft community, I got to do another read here real quick. Have you? That's called a professional segue.
That's well
for
done.
those of you listening at home. Although I think when you do a segue, you're not supposed to mention it, but that's all part of the irony. Have you ever wished you could be an NFL general manager? Well, of course you can. And now you can, thanks to Reality Sports Online, a powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an actual NFL general manager. Reality Sports Online was designed by former NFL front office personnel and features a revolutionary free agency auction room, which mimics the actual free agency process, enabling owners to compete against each other to negotiate and sign with and sign the NFL's top talent to single or multi-year contracts. The platform can host up to 32 teams. That's a lot. And has tons of other cool features in addition to free agency, like rookie drafts, multi-team trades, franchise tags, injured reserve, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much more. Seriously, like, if you can tell, there's a lot going on there. And I actually play in a Reality Sports Online league, and I love it. It's a ton of fun. Like, there's nothing that comes closer to mimicking like being an actual GM and managing your own team. So go ahead and test your general manager skills by visiting realitysportsonline.com. Participate in a free mock free agency auction draft today. If you like what you see, use the promo code BYB10 to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. So, Mark, getting into your transition into the draft world, like what did that community do for your kind of your career path here?
I mean, you really want to talk about getting that hand out and that hand up and that lift up in this community. I mean, I think sort of one of the many breaks that I've sort of had along this journey was Matt Waldman, who, and he knows this, but I'll say it publicly. I mean, he's been, one of the people that has really reached out to me, and, I can't thank him enough for how he's kind of, lifted me up and pulled me up to have him on his shows and things like that. And I remember after the draft, when everybody kind of steps away from, okay, it's now May, season's over, draft's over, we can kind of do whatever we want, do some different things. He has that RSP Writers project each spring and summer where he, puts together a cool little scenario and has different writers come on from the community and kind of challenge them with this scenario and write something about it. And I remember reading on his site last year's scenario, which is sort of like the football Space Jam, where you've got pick one team from players from past, present, and, assemble your team to beat a race of aliens. And I remember reading about that. And at the bottom, there's this paragraph that says, look, if you think I missed you and you want to be included, or if you want to be included for a future project like this, just send me an email with some of your work and I'll take a look. And I remember like reading that and hemming and hawing. I'm like, look, he has no idea who I am. Clearly not the writer that he is or anything like that. But, maybe I should send him the email anyway. Maybe he'll read it. Maybe he'll critique my work, or I could get included in the next one. Or, he might say no, but that's the worst he can do. So put together an email, sent it to him with some writing samples. And I figured, I'll never hear back. And like an hour later, I get an email back from him saying, I want you in this one. Like, can you do it? Do you have the time? Because I really, I like what you're doing. I like it. Like, can you, be part of it? And I was blown away. You probably don't remember ER. That was probably well before your time, but I
remember my parents watching it and not being allowed to.
Yeah. I mean, I went to when I was in college, a lot of my friends were like pre-med type. So like Thursday nights, like we'd stop what we were doing at like 10 o'clock and watch ER. But there's a scene in the opening credits where Eric LaSalle like performs some surgery and gets out of the OR and does like the full body, like fist pump. Well, that was me when I get that email back from Matt. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. It's a huge opportunity. So, that was kind of the first like instance where the community kind of welcomed me in, and it's been like that ever since. And all the guests that you've had on that have talked about the draft Twitter community, I mean, there are times when you're like, wow, this is a crazy sort of group and environment, and things are happening at a rapid pace. But at the same time, the like promotional stuff that people do for other people's work, it's amazing. And Sigmund talked about it a lot. I mean, it's like, and coming from a world like the legal community where you don't ever want to promote somebody else's work, because then they're going to steal your clients and you're going to have food taken off your table. Well, if you read, Matt Waldman's take on a quarterback, you're not signing a contract to read only Matt Waldman. You could still read my stuff too. And to see people constantly sharing and promoting other people's work, it's a great thing. And it's, 180 degrees away from what I'm used to professionally, but I love seeing it. And I love sharing other people's stuff. And, like Sigmund talked about, if you like what I'm doing and you trust what I'm doing, then if I share somebody else's stuff, you'll trust that too, and you'll read that as well. And there are enough people reading this stuff every day that we can all have people reading everything we put out there.
Yeah, you made a couple of really good points there that I want to circle back on. And the first being like, just putting yourself out there to Waldman, like somebody that you respected, and like kind of having that idea that, the worst that he can do is say no, because I think that's really it, but it's really intimidating when you're,
it really is.
Yeah. Like, especially when I was first starting out, I was like, I was 22 years old. I was literally nobody. At least you could say like, hey, I used to play the game. I know a thing or two. Like for me, I was just another jackass like on his couch. Now I'm still another jackass on his couch.
At the end of the day, that's what we all are.
Yeah, right. I just happen to like have a job now, but it's still the same thing. But it's really hard. And I remember like seeing opportunities out there and being intimidated to just send an email in or whatever. But you got to get past that, because it really is no big deal. And I got shot down by plenty of places, which is fun now to think about that, I've become successful. But there were plenty of times starting out that I sent, an application in somewhere like, hey, I'd like to write for you guys. I'd like to do this for you. That they're like, no thanks. No interest in you. And that's fine, but you got to use that. You got to use it as fuel. It's really an important thing that I think people get intimidated by, like being turned down and all that. Yeah. But if you had never done that, Mark, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
I probably would. That's exactly right. I probably wouldn't be here right now. I mean, and Matt's just one example of a number that I could probably reel off of people that have helped me up. I mean, Dan Hatman too. I mean, I signed up for the Scouting Academy course last summer and took it just to study quarterbacks. And, I wanted to make sure that I was looking for the right things. I mean, I hadn't really ever done sort of quarterback evaluations. I mean, I've done them, on my own. And then last year at Inside the Pylon, I did it, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just talking out of my ass. Mm-hmm. So I signed up for that. And I also did it as a way of sort of networking. Again, I'm from a world where, you pass out business cards, you do things like that. So I wanted to sort of meet some people in the industry. And Dan was another guy that, took a liking to my work and then sort of got into Inside the Pylon and saw what we were doing and saw that there was, there's something there to what we're doing. And he was, one of the guys sort of instrumental in the glossary series that we're doing, which came about completely by accident, helping us to see that there was a need for it out there. I mean, the glossary thing kind of came about when we were breaking down plays and you could take the time to define cover 1, cover 3 and all that stuff. We were like, why don't we save that and do it as a project on its own? And people dig it. People like learning about that stuff. So we like to joke that look, we want somebody to read us and then feel like they're the smartest guy at the end of the bar on Sunday afternoon when, Troy Aikman's like, look, Dallas just dropped into cover 3 buzz, and they can be like, yeah, I know what that is. And tell all their friends.
I say that all the time at work. That because there's a lot of, frankly, especially in big media, there's a lot of pushback to while people won't say this, implicitly dumb down your content. And, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, and that's fine. It happens a lot, but I could be wrong. But I think that, like you said, that's really important because, fans want to feel like they're the smartest guy in the room. I want to feel like I'm the smartest guy in the room when it comes to football. I would love, when I was, before I even was writing and I was just watching football, that's what made people tell me, like, you should start your own blog, because like I could watch the game and be like, I know that player, I know what the hell they're talking about. And I think that's a really good. I think the glossary thing is really good for that, because also you see, because analysts use that to their advantage too. Like, to be honest, they'll say something that, like, if your scouting report's just filled with jargon, like it's kind of like it becomes a piss measuring contest, but like,
right.
But it's so much better to be transparent with your readers.
Yeah. And, I mean, there are people out there that you could just like give them like lowest common denominator type stuff. And there's definitely a market for that, but there's definitely also a market for people that want to learn more about the game, because, like the Pat Kerr one, like, don't watch the ball type series. There's so much that goes on just one play of football that, haven't played the game, like I might recognize, or there's stuff that I miss. And, I get asked a lot, like, do you think like you need to have played the game to write about it? And my answer is always like, no, hell no. Like there are things that I can speak to, haven't played quarterback, where I can try to like put you in that moment of, and I even did an article on this, like from like the end of one play to the end of the next, like what happens. And there's a lot that I can talk to, but that doesn't mean that like somebody that hasn't played the game can't write about it. If you've got a message and some content and a way of looking at it that's different than somebody that's played, put it out there. Like, I don't care if you've never taken a snap in your life, or you've never set foot on a football field, and you think, I've got something I want to write, but what if people don't take me seriously? If you've done the work, people will take you seriously. And if people don't take you seriously because you didn't play the game, well, then they're the idiot and not you.
Yeah, that's, as somebody that's never taken a snap in their life, I hope that that's true. And another thing that you mentioned there in your original story about Inside the Pylon is like, community and the welcoming of that. And I think one of the things that you guys do really well, like, is you have I feel like you guys have a ton of writers, a ton of people that I know from like the draft Twitter community, kind of, contributing there. Why is that important to build that sort of community, within your own site, and then just in general with other people, like online?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that Inside the Pylon does really well is like our internal process. Like, one of the things when we first started, like, we have an editorial process where every piece, whether it's myself or somebody that's brand new to the site, gets hit by multiple editors along the way. Like, we don't just like, I don't just sit down and put together an article and just like shove it live. Like, everything gets edited. So it's like we've built a community internally. So like every piece gets different sets of eyes and then some different input on it. And it's a collaborative process where you submit it, it gets edited, it comes back to you, and you kind of like refine some things or refine your argument a little bit. And you need to have a group of people that you're working with that you trust to like turn yourself over to, and then to give you feedback. And sometimes the feedback you're not going to like. Like, I've had stuff where I've gotten it back and it's been like this, no, we can't put this up because it's not really that good. And so you've got to have people around you that you trust. And so, everybody that we brought into the fold has, really been open to that process. And because it will make them better and make them sort of a better writer. And, we know for a lot of people that come and work with us, their ultimate goal might be something else. Like, they don't always want to write for Inside the Pylon for the next 10 years of their life. And that's fine. I mean, we bring in young people and help to kind of cultivate what it is that they want to create, find themselves, find their voice, and maybe move on. But it's important to have that sort of trust and community aspect, even behind the scenes. I mean, out of all the like articles and stuff that we put up, there's tons of like chats and handouts and stuff that we have that never see the light of day, where, iron sharpens iron. I mean, we refine arguments and come up with ideas and piece ideas and podcast ideas. I mean, the mock war room series that we're doing was something that we fleshed out behind the scenes, where we're like, look, let's try to do something a little bit differently and sort of piece it together that way, and then make it better before it goes live. So, and I think that's another thing that's important to anybody that wants to sort of find their way in this industry, is to have somebody that you can trust, not only for support and sort of that like helping you out in that way, but who can read what you write, or like look at if you create videos or stuff and give you feedback, put on that shield and helmet and sword and like chop away at it and make you better, because it will make you better and your stuff will be better as a result.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely been my situation as well. Like I had people, you know, some people that weren't even football writers, just general
Yeah.
people, and look at like reception perception before I first published it, or when I did first publish it, and be like, okay, well, tell me what you think about this, or like let me know, give me feedback, like before and even just like I remember one night like tweeting out the charts like back at the beginning, just like people had no idea what the hell was going to come of it, but I'm just like, look at this and tell me what you think about it, like just
Yeah.
react to me, like react to this thing, and it was really helpful. It helped me kind of know what I wanted it to become, what it should become, and that's what it now it is what it is now, and maybe someday the parts of that will change, but it's really important to have that sort of the people you can go back and forth with, and like make sure it's somebody that you trust, like you said, and also like somebody that you can take their criticism and it won't hurt your feelings,
Yeah,
because that's the hardest part.
That is really the hardest part. I mean, I remember when I turned in my first in for Inside the Pylon, Dave McCullough, who's our editor-in-chief, who does a great job for us, he was like, look, this is great. And he sends me the link back to the Google Doc, and it's just a sea of red. I mean, everything's completely marked up, and I'm just like, oh my God, like what am I doing here? And you feel awful at first, and you're like, do I really want to do this? But then you start to realize that people like Dave and Phil and James and all the other guys at Inside the Pylon that do the behind the scenes editing, I mean, the guys that worked on the book for me, that did all that stuff, it makes it so much better. And, at the end of the day, like, we're not in the news breaking business. Like, we're not, trying to beat Shefty and Mortensen and all those guys to free agent signings. Like, there's no real rush to get it done. Our goal has always been, like, whatever we put up there, let's make sure it's just as good as we can make it. And, we've got a team in place to do that. And, I thank, God every day for those guys, because they make me look good, frankly.
No doubt about it. Mark, you mentioned your book, and I want to talk about that, for one, because it's important, and two, like selfishly, because I actually do want to, probably not even about football at some point, I want to actually publish a book as well. But that's the topic for another day. So selfishly, I want to pick your brain on this, but kind of walk me through the process of publishing the book. It's 17 drives, or what? Like this is
that's exactly right. 17 drives.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I was like, I know I had that pulled up, like ready to read off. I'm like, oh, you idiot, you forget.
No, you got it. No, well, I mean, I probably mentioned this earlier. Like, I had this idea for a fiction book, actually, that I'd started and stopped, and that was going to be what I was going to do in the football run when I was decided, look, I'm done with law. I'm going to finally write this book. And then the Inside the Pylon thing happened. So I put that back on the shelf, which I'm taking, spoiler alert, I'm taking off the shelf, and I'm hoping to finish that this summer. Like, that's hopefully book 2. But book 1, 17 drives, was kind of born out of the work that I was doing on the site, where, I would break down a couple of drives each week from the pro and the college game, like each player, the bulk of the plays from an X's and O's perspective, and kind of try to give people the sense of how a drive comes together, like the thought process, the play call, and the decision making, the plays that are good, that are bad, how the defense was a step early or a step late, where they could have gotten off the field, but they didn't. So early around in the season, like around September or so, in one of our chats, like I was just talking about, there was the idea bandied about, look, why don't we save the bigger drives from the college season, break them down and put them together in book form and actually publish a book? Why don't we do that? So that was how the idea was kind of born. And, it's one of those things, I wish I could have gotten a jump start on it, but you can't, because had I started writing it in September, you'd have a lot of Ohio State, Michigan, and Baylor drives, which, they didn't make it to the playoffs. So you had to kind of wait. So around November, when you really got a good feel of, who's going to make it to the playoffs and stuff, is when I started just sitting down and going through the tape and breaking down each play of all of these drives and putting it together. And, I'll say it took a ton of work, but not just from me. I mean, I had the editorial staff at Inside the Pylon was willing to help me go through each chapter, go through each play, and, edit it and put it together. And then Chuck Zauda did a great job kind of formatting it together into like book form, to now where I literally have a book that people have actually bought, which I think is the craziest thing in this whole sort of story, that people have actually bought it and read it and liked it.
Yeah. No, that's really, it is definitely, I saw you tweeting about that a little while ago. I have not read the book, disclaimer. I will definitely look to get it at some point, but I have such a trouble. Like the off season is really the only time I can actually
Yeah, I mean,
read
that's
things.
just it. Like, everybody that, in this great community of football media and football writers, everybody's like, yeah, I got it. I'll read it in June. Like,
Yes,
I sent it to Matt Waldman. I sent it to Waldman, and he sent me a message. He's like, thanks. I'll get to it in June.
Yeah,
And
right.
everybody's saying that, and believe me, I understand it. So hopefully, when everybody gets to it in June, they still like it. So
well, and it's really like I said, it's really inspiring to me because that's something that's one of my intermediate to long-term goals is to publish books. And like I said, I don't want to publish books about football. I want to, I'll publish like reception perception sort of publications, that sort of stuff. But I'm talking like a real book. So it was really cool for me to see you do that. Like, and if you want to check out Mark's book, like it's pinned on your Twitter profile, which is at Mark Schofield, just like it's spelled on the podcast here. It's pinned on your profile right there. Definitely check it out. It's 318 pages. It looks like that feels like a lot of pages.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing about the way it's kind of structured is like each play gets like multiple diagrams. So you get the pre-snap alignment of offense and defense, like the play art, like the play flow of how it comes together. So, it took a while. Chapter 14 itself is that like Michigan State 22-play drive against Iowa in the Big Ten championship game, which took like 3 days to write from like the film and writing it and stuff like that. But, people have liked it, and there's definitely, a market for that. And there's, another message and just another example of trying something different, trying something new. Like, how many people have written books that break down one drive from 1 week of the college football season? Well, I'm pretty sure the answer is one. Like, I don't think anybody else has done it. So if you've got like a vision like that, whatever it is you might want to do that's football related, not football, just give it a shot. I mean, you can publish a book on your own and put it up there and tweet about it, and people will buy it. And that's kind of what's happened with 17 Drives. And it's been incredible to see. And like Alex Kirby wrote some nice words about it the other day, which I was very appreciative for. And again, in this community of people that are willing to share good work, if you do something like that and put it out there, people will read it and people will buy it and people will talk about it. And, you see that all the time with draft guides and, reception perception, which is a great product, which, people should be reading, people should be sharing that stuff. And they do, because if it's good, people will share it. And that's the way this is all kind of spun out.
Yeah, you make a good point about just doing it. Like, I feel like that's another thing that gets said pretty much every podcast. Like, I promise you that if you have an idea that you think is interesting, there's at least one other idiot out there that has that idea, and I don't say idiot to be condescending but one of my point is like, if you find something interesting, there's someone else that finds it interesting about the game of football in particular. So whatever your idea is, just do it. And like, what's again, another point, like, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah. Right. Like, maybe I put reception perception out there and everybody's like, don't care. And all right, just move on and try another idea. Like, you're not on a stop clock here. Like, there's, it doesn't really matter. Mark, kind of winding down here a little bit. First, I want to ask you before I get to another question that I really want to get your thoughts on. First, so what's next? Like, now you're at Inside the Pylon. You published a book. You're at a pretty stable point. It looks like everything has again, that risk of like leaving the personal job or the personal life, or God, I'm sorry, mumbling, leaving the day job and like kind of taking that personal risk. There you go. It seems like it's all really working out well, but what's next?
Well, I think, trying something new is what's next. And, a lot of, how we've kind of gotten to this point Inside the Pylon and with the book and stuff like that, there have been ideas that have worked and there have been ideas that have crashed and burned and that we've stopped doing. And when we first started Inside the Pylon, and I talked about this earlier, how we tried to gear ourselves towards a sort of Patriots readership base. Like, I was doing a series called Know Your Enemy, where I broke down from a film perspective, like every single defensive player on the roster of the Pats' next opponent. And these were like multi-page, like 25 video type pieces that one or two people would read a week. And it was pretty clear pretty quickly that like, it's just not worth the time. So, so we've had stuff that has worked, we've had stuff that hasn't. So, I think the next step is kind of writing this next book, which is going to be that book that I'm finally going to write. And it's a fiction book about sort of tangentially the game of football, but continually trying new stuff, trying to challenge yourself as a content creator, which people that want to get into this, that are into this, need to continually do, because, eventually I can write about quarterbacks and arm talent and anticipation and timing and decision making. And yeah, that's stuff that, is needed from year to year during draft season, things like that. But you want to keep getting better. So trying new things and see where Inside the Pylon goes. Like, I'd love to get to a point where Inside the Pylon, maybe it's not on par with Yahoo or Bleacher Report or NFL.com. I mean, I don't know if we'd ever get there, but that's what we're going to try to do. I mean, we're going to try to literally see how far we can take this. And hopefully we get to some, run on the echelon or on the ladder of media where we're now bringing in the next generation and the generation after that to kind of bring them along and get it to a point where everybody's, making enough money where they can be happy and live a decent life at home and at work. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. And if it works, great. If not, if I have to go elsewhere, if I have to go back to practice in law, well, fine, but I've taken my shot. And, you've had on people that have, got into that business and are more established in this business. And I'm kind of the in progress model of that next wave of guys that are trying to get in. And I'm, I've angled my way in there just enough where I can keep doing this, and I'm grateful for it every day. And just like everything else, you just got to keep trying to push yourself to get to that next level.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of just not setting limits on yourself.
Right.
Like,
I mean, who knows where this goes, but just keep plugging at it every day.
Yeah, no doubt. So again, before we kind of close out here, Mark, like one thing I want to, pose to you, like hypothetically, say somebody listens to this podcast and was in like a similar situation to what you were when you did, leave practicing law and kind of took that risk, to become like a football writer or analyst or, what have you. What would be the one thing, like if you could tell them one thing, what would it be? Like somebody, again, like kind of in your exact shoes comes to you and says, I heard you talk about this on Harmon's podcast. Like, what's the first thing you would say to them?
I mean, it's literally something I said earlier. Like, look, you get one game, you get one drive at this thing we call life. And, if you're in that day-to-day grind where it's just grating on you and it's wearing you down and you're unhappy and you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, well, there's a guy that got out. There's a guy that got off the island. It is now – maybe he's not on the mainland where he's back to shore, but he's close. Like, hearing my voice, just where I was in that place. And if you are in a similar mode, like, just take the risk, just roll the dice, because, you can always go back to that world. You can always go back to that prior life if it doesn't work out. But living with regret on top of where you already are, where you're already miserable and you're unhappy, and then you add a layer of what if I had taken the shot? Like, that just adds another layer to it. So why not take the risk? If you're in a position like I was, not only where I was miserable, but I was lucky enough to be in a position financially and with everything else, the support system I had where I could take the risk. If you're in a similar position like that and you can do it, just do it. Just roll the dice. Just put yourself out there. Take a risk. Put yourself out there. Write a blog. Start a website. Start a podcast. Make videos for YouTube. Just roll the dice. Share it with people. Heck, send it to me. And maybe somebody gives you that hand up. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's Waldman. Maybe it's Rummy. Maybe it's any other of the great members of this community that will give you that hand up and help you up a little bit. Just take the shot. Like, it's not worth waiting for. It's not worth sitting in your office and being unhappy and wondering what could be.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly said. So, Mark, we're going to close out here, but I always give the guests, one last time to have the floor before I yank it out from under you. So, anything you want to convey to the audience or say just before we get out of here, now's the time. Speak your piece.
Speak my piece. Well, I mean, first, I got to thank you, Matt, for not only for having me on, but for having this series. I think it's, it is a great way of people to talk about not only the football industry, but just sort of life in general. I mean, there's so much more to life and this business than just grinding out tape and writing articles or writing fantasy articles, or whatever it is that you're putting out there, there's life aspects that people sometimes need to hear for the first time or have reaffirmed for them. So again, thanks you for this. And I mean, I guess like what I was just kind of talking about was, life can send you down different paths. And, my life plan had sent me down the path of a law firm job and working in the legal industry and all that stuff. And when you get to the point like I did, where you realize that life's sort of path doesn't mesh with where you want to be and it doesn't work for you, ask for help or get out or do whatever it is you need to do sooner rather than later. And, if I could close with just one thing, it's ask for help is not a bad thing. Asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. Like whether it's asking for help at work, if like me, you get to a point where your mind just isn't right and you need help with that, it's not a sign of weakness to do that. If you're trying to get into this industry or any industry, asking for help or guidance from other people who are established like you, Matt, like why you started this, it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. So wherever people need help or are struggling with, seek help. It will help you. You will be better off for it. And if I could close with anything, I would close with that message.
Yep, I completely think that is very well said, and it applies a lot to chasing this sort of this journey as far as being a football writer, if this is what you want to do, or in general, just whatever it is in your life, man. Like, yes, it does not hurt to ask for help, and once you do it, I promise you will probably feel better about it. But anyways, I want to thank you so much for coming on, Mark. If you're not familiar with his work, definitely check it out at Inside the Pylon and buy 17 Drives. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to read it, and it's going to be good. So I encourage everybody else to do that and follow him on Twitter at Mark Schofield. And for everybody that's listening, I want to, again, thank you so much for continuing to support the podcast. And if I can ask anything from you guys, I mean, I already asked too much anyways, just to put up with me for an hour. Just if you could, rate and review the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, or any sort of feedback that you can give me and help the podcast continue to get better. And support it and grow it. I hope that's not too much. And, please consider doing that if you haven't already. It's been tremendous. This thing is just getting bigger and bigger by the episode, and I'm really happy with it. So I definitely want to thank you all for listening today, and I hope you learned something.